Shot. There you go, see? Hey, everybody, welcome. We're so glad that you're here tonight for our Wednesday night Bible study with Steve and Josh. And so we're going to continue. That's right. We're going to continue our characters of the Bible study. We're going to be in Ruth. So welcome as you're joining us online and in person. So like I said, we're going to continue our study of Ruth. Steve is going to be our main teacher tonight. And so I won't steal too much from him, but Steve loves the book of Ruth.
I do.
So I think we're in for quite a great lesson, good dive into Ruth. If I can spoil anything for you, Steve will do the entire book of Ruth.
I will.
In 1 hour.
I will.
So.
We will.
That's right, we will.
That's right.
So let me pray for us, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. Lord, I just come before you now, and I just want to thank you for the time that we have together as a church family to study your word. Lord, I pray as we dive into the book of Ruth tonight, Lord, that you would be the one that speaks out to us, Lord, that you would help us to see the lessons that you want us to see, Lord, that as we study this story, that, Lord, we would just see why you put the book of Ruth in your word, Lord, that you gave to us to know you better. So, Lord, I just pray that you would speak through Steve. Give him your words tonight. Open our hearts and allow us to hear from you. And, Lord, just bless this time that we have together. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
So our stage is a little bouncy, and Josh is a very violent prayer. I actually thought we just went through an earthquake for a second.
Sorry.
But anyhow, a couple of really quick disclosures. I have a speech impediment that I hide very, very well most of the time, but my THs and my Fs are really hard for me. I went to speech therapy for years as a young person. My grandmother had the same thing. So every once in a while you'll hear me say both or Ruth. So if I say Ruth tonight, I mean Ruth. But
don't bark like a dog back at you?
But it is something that once I get going, I kind of lose myself and I will say it. So just forgive me. The second thing is that me and Josh, we've admitted this before, but we've taught through all these lessons prior on our online Bible study. We're getting to the point where you're going to get new stuff from us very quickly. But we've taught all these on our, and so this morning, I did what I always do. I went to my file to get my Bible study of Ruth out to start practicing and looking at it and all that kind of stuff. And I realized it wasn't in there. And so I went to my computer to get it, and I realized it wasn't in there. And then I talked to Josh, and Josh goes, oh, no, remember, you had just taught that to your class, so you just did it on your Bible. So I don't know what you're getting tonight, but you're going to get me just reading Ruth and talking about it. So this one will probably be more organic. Can I use that word?
Yeah.
Organic? Probably than some of the others.
I'll say it'll come from Steve's heart. Steve loves this book, and he knows it ins and out.
I do love this book, and I've taught it multiple times, and so I'm excited about teaching it. And the first thing I was going to say about Ruth is that it's not misnamed, but the book of Ruth is not just all about Ruth. Naomi is probably the main character of the book, but it's really a story about Naomi, about Ruth, about Boaz, and about God. And those are your four characters. There's really some side people that slide in and out, but those are your four characters, and that's who really matters. And the other thing I love about Ruth is that Ruth is a love story. It's a love story between a man and a woman. It's a love story between a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law. And we probably all should look at this. If you're married, you should probably read Ruth just to remind yourself that God wants you to love your in-laws, even if they're bitter, as Naomi is. But it's a love story about that. But it really, more importantly, it's foreshadowing the love story of God and man through Jesus Christ. And so the whole book of Ruth is really a foreshadowing of Jesus Christ as our Redeemer, as Boaz is the Redeemer of Ruth. And we're going to talk about that tonight. Another thing I love about Ruth is one of those weird, that's not right, unique, there's a better word, unique books of the Bible that is not connected to the other narratives. So it's not like you're reading through Kings and it's just another story in Kings. You're reading through, it is in the ages of the Judges, but it's not connected necessarily to the book of the Judges. It is a standalone narrative. Josh is going to do Esther next week. It's one of the other standalone narratives that are out there. Jonah would kind of sort of be that, even though Jonah is also prophecy. But so it does take place during the Judges, and I do love this book, and I can get talking about it and kind of forget that other people are in the room. So remind me every once in a while. But anyhow, so I'm going to start off with asking Josh a question. So Josh, you ready?
Yeah, man.
Okay,
Come on.
Checking. Josh got a haircut just for this.
That's right.
No. So Josh, describe a time or situation in your life that seemed hopeless but turned out for good, and how did you see God working through that experience?
I don't know if I've ever felt totally hopeless. I can tell you that I'm going to kind of touch on 2 time periods when God really had to come through for me.
I only
When
asked you one question.
I know,
Yeah.
but I started when I started college. It was in 2008, and everything was just beginning on the brink of the recession, right? If you, we all probably remember that. And in the period of my first year in college, my parents went from being able to help me pay for school to losing the family business over that first year. And so it went from Josh having help and security in his life to Josh having to figure out how to do everything on his own with no help from anybody because everybody was drowning in the family. And so I just remember kind of, for the first time in my life, really kind of say, okay, God, you're going to have to provide. You're going to have to do something because I don't know of any other way. And I remember, God of just putting people in my life, helping me find all the steps to find how to pay for college, giving me the jobs that I needed to meet my needs while I was there, and all of that. And then I would say the second time, though, is when I went to go do the church revitalization project that I was a part of in Indianapolis, that there came a point in doing that I realized that church revitalization is really hard work. Yep. And that there's a lot of difficulties that go with trying to start something afresh and to start something new, that you'll run into obstacles and you just kind of step back and you can say, God, I've exhausted my knowledge. I've exhausted every expert's knowledge. I've exhausted all my friends' knowledge. I've exhausted my physical capabilities. I've exhausted everything that I know how to try or get a hold of. And you stop and you say, you're the only thing that can move here, the only way that something can happen. And so I just remember being in that spot where you just say, there's literally nothing more else, or nothing more I can do, nothing else I can do. And you have to stop and say, okay, God, I have to be okay with trusting in your call and what you want me to do in this moment, despite it's only you.
So me and Shannon, and she doesn't know I'm telling this story, so I always have trouble telling stories when she's in front of me because she gives me looks like, why are you telling this story?
Just
but
look over there.
So I'm going to look at Katie because she's not my wife. But when we first got married, I think we were married about 3-4 months. We were living in a 400 square foot apartment that we paid $408 a month for rent. We both had jobs. We liked our jobs, they just didn't pay us anything. And so I come home one day from work, and it's like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and Shannon's sitting on the bed just crying. I'm like, oh, great. This is probably my first time I came home and my wife was crying, maybe not, but I think it was. And I'm like, what's wrong? She goes, we have $35 in our bank account, and we have 9 more days till we get paid. And I grew up fairly poor, was kind of used to God providing. Shannon didn't grow up as poor and was not as used to that. And I was kind of like, well, God's going to take care of us. Let's pray and all this kind of stuff. And so within that week, Shannon got a job that paid us about 10 to 20 times what she was making at her other job. I got a friend of mine said, hey, I'm about to leave a job. Would you like to interview for it? And so I took a second job. And within a week or two, we both had decent jobs and got to provide. We also somehow survived for 9 weeks or 9 days on $35. We ate tuna fish and rice. I remember that. We ate grilled cheese. We ate whatever was in our refrigerator. Period. It didn't matter what it looked like, but God provided it. And I know for me, it was a reminder that God always provides and God always works through those situations. For Shane, I think it was a really big step because she had not been at that point in her life pretty much where she had to rely on God to provide for her physical needs ever. And so I think it was a really big step for her. And now we get these things and we can sit there and we can kind of laugh about, well, there was one time when we had $35 in our checking account. So just seeing God at work, even when it feels hopeless, $35 and we would not make it on $35 nowadays, I don't think, for 9 days. But so Naomi found herself in a hopeless situation. So I'm going to start reading in verse 1 of chapter 1. It says, in the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. And the man's name was Elimelech, and the name of his wife was Naomi. I want to stop there for just a second. Notice that it doesn't say, we see this all the time in the Bible, it doesn't say that God had Elimelech leave because of a famine and go to the land of Moab to provide for him. Elimelech made this decision on his own to take his whole entire family to a pagan land that the Moabites are actually talked about in very many other places in the New Old Testament about do not associate with the Moabites. So he chose to take his family to Moab. Yes. And so this wasn't God delivering them from the famine. God had a plan, but Elimelech took it into his own hands and went to Moab. So he goes to Moab, and it says, and the names of his two sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. And they went into the country of Moab and remained there. But Elimelech, the husband of I said I was going to trouble saying Ruth, and I can't say Naomi. Naomi died, and she was left with her two sons. They took Moabite wives, not a positive thing. It's going to turn into a positive thing because God's at work here. But they were told not to take wives from the surrounding people. So this was not necessarily a good thing that they did. It says, and the name of one was Orpah, and the name of the other was Ruth. And they lived there about 10 years, and both Mahlon and Chilion died. So the woman was left without her two sons and her husband. So just a real quick culture and history lesson about what Naomi was facing is that in that culture, your husband was where your inheritance came from. If it wasn't your husband, your inheritance and wealth came from your male sons. She was left without a husband, without two sons. In her mind, she had nothing. She was an older woman, probably no prospects, and she's going to tell us she has no prospects, but no prospects of remarrying, and she had lost everything, and she was in a foreign land. Okay, she wasn't even in her homeland. To her, this situation was hopeless, and we're going to see how hopeless it was here in just a second. So reading on in verse 6, she says, then she arose, and with her daughter-in-laws, she returned from the country of Moab. For she had heard in the fields of Moab that the Lord had visited his people and given them food. That's the first little glimpse we get that God is at work in the story, okay? She heard in Moab, because God wanted her to hear, that there was all of a sudden the famine was over in Israel. God was starting to provide for his people. God was giving her an opportunity to go back to where she would have some means, even if they were meager. And so we see God show up there. And so it says, so she set out from that place where she was with her two daughters-in-laws, and they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her daughter-in-laws, go, return each of you to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with me and the dead with me. So when we look at this relationship, it's a good relationship. Naomi is telling her daughter-in-laws, you've been great to me. I love you. I want the best for you. This is not Rebekah talking about those Hittite women that Esau married. Okay, this is not the same thing. There's a positive relationship here. And so she says, the Lord grant that you may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband. So go, take other husbands. You have my blessing to go back to your people. Then she kissed them, and they lifted their voices. And they said to her, no, we will return with you to be with your people. So they liked her too. Because a lot of us, if their mother-in-law said go, we're like, yeah, all right, bye, see you. Not me. I love my mother-in-law dearly. So yeah, that's truth, actually. But so then Naomi replies, but Naomi said, and this is verse 11, but she says, turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I hope, even if I should have a husband this night and should bear sons, would you therefore wait till they were grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, for it is exceedingly bitter to me for your sake that the hand of the Lord has gone against me. So she talks about she talks about the fact that of her bitterness, and she talks about that God is against her. She starts to feel that everything that's going on in her life is kind of conspiring towards her. She has so little hope, she doesn't want to drag them along with her. She just wants to be left alone. Even though they can provide her some care, they can provide her some joy, they can provide her companionship, she's like, I don't want to do that because I don't want to drag you down into what I am about to take. And so she's basically feels like, and we've all been here before when things are going, that the Lord is against her. Even though we know from the story that the Lord is, I'll use the word conspiring just because it works here, conspiring to bless her in a large way. So then it goes on, down in verse 14, it says, then they lifted up their voices and they wept again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. The word clung to her, we kind of think like I'm clinging to Josh, like please don't go. It actually is the same word that the Bible uses when it talks about a husband and a wife, about cleaving together. Basically, she was giving herself, like considering herself one with Naomi. So she clung to her. And to her God, and she said, see, Naomi speaking here, she says, see, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. It's kind of interesting that Naomi's okay with them going back to their gods after we can see obviously that she's spoken to them about her God. But she tells her to go back with her sister-in-law. But Ruth said, "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death departs me from you." So we see where Naomi is pushing Ruth away, okay? And Ruth, a former pagan at least, possibly a pagan still, a Moabitess, is used here to tell her, no, this is wrong. I'm going to stay with you because it's the right thing to do. We kind of see this a little bit with Pharaoh and Abraham, where Abraham gives Pharaoh his wife Sarah, and Pharaoh calls him out like, why would you do this? This is just wrong. And then we see it a little bit with Isaac and Abimelech, where Abimelech does the same thing and says, this is wrong. This is where God uses a believer who's doing something wrong and using someone who is not a believer to not shame them, but to correct their thinking and correct their view and to put them on the right path. And so it says, and when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. So Naomi just zip. So then we have in verse 19, they arrive in Bethlehem. And it says, so the two of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. And when they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the woman said, "Is this Naomi?" And she said to them, "Do not call me Naomi. Call me Mara," which means bitter. "For the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has testified against me and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me?" So she's gone from feeling hopeless and that everything is against her, including God, to speaking her hopelessness, her bitterness. Like the word bitter doesn't mean hopeless. The word bitter means I'm hopeless, but I'm angry because I'm hopeless because God should have done something about this. And so she's now kind of blaming God and saying, why would he do this against me? And then so in verse 22, it says, so Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, with her, who returned from the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. Josh, why do you think it was important that they left in this little line that says they came into Bethlehem at the time of the barley harvest?
I think it's just important because, often it goes with what they had heard back earlier in chapter 1 when it said they heard word that the Lord had visited his people. Mm-hmm. And so you kind of get that, they've come and they find that it's true, that the Lord is providing. And the more as I think about it is anytime the harvest time, it's used in Scripture and also literally during this time as a time of provision. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's just kind of a neat thing to think about because their situation is they feel they have no provision, and they've come when the time of provision.
So to use a pun, there was a kernel of hope that they arrived, and they arrived right at the perfect time. They arrived during the harvest time, and during the harvest time was the time when the poor, the widowed, the orphan could glean in the fields of the people who had food. So they came at gleaning time. They had come at another time, this opportunity would never have presented itself. And so it was the right time, perfect time. God was caring for Naomi, even though she had just one verse ahead said that he was against her and not. And so the other thing I think is sometimes when we think about when we're going through troubles, when we're going through hardships, when we're in a hopeless situation, when we finally throw our hands up is sometimes when God works the most. And when we see God at work, we sit there and I can't do anything else. This situation's hopeless. And we stop efforting and God starts working. Or at least we start seeing God working. It might be a better way of saying that. So, Josh, question for you, if I can get to my question. Have you ever had a time where God gave you a little glimmer of hope, a kernel, as we might say, working things out in a very right time to assure that there was hope for you?
Maybe I'm just going to go back to, I'm sure there have been more times, I just don't know. I don't know if I've ever could honestly say I felt totally hopeless. But I know that in times when I needed great provision, that when all this stuff was happening when I was in school and I was able to go out and get not the job I would pick, but a job that met my needs until I guess God provided a better opportunity that was a job for me to get work experience and provision for the next 3 years of college. And so I think just seeing God drop those things out there. And so since I mentioned the time when I was in Indiana and this was going on and I was feeling this hopelessness, I think for me, the kernel of hope was that God didn't stop speaking to me during that time. And, and that he hadn't forgotten me, because what he had spoke to me was, I want you to wait and watch and listen. And it was just this great, I guess, kernel of hope in the sense he was saying, I'm not going to tell you what's next, but I haven't forgotten you. And so it was just kind of this nice, two different ways, but this nice way of God was providing hope in each of those situations.
In a hopeless or dead-end situation, it doesn't always have to be bad. When I was thinking through this, I was thinking about when I was, I don't know how many years ago it was, this was at least when Billy Cruz was here. Billy Cruz came to me and said, hey, I'm going to put you in charge of missions. You need to find us a people group. And so I was like, all right, we'll find a people group to adopt. Well, Billy retired. Curtis came. We're 4 years into Curtis, 5 years, 6 years into Curtis being here. We still hadn't found a people group. We had tried multiple people groups. Every time we went anywhere, doors were shut. Things just didn't work. And I remember we had a bunch of our relationship in Mexico, our relationship in Costa Rica. We're kind of closing down, not closing down, but coming to an end. And we went to Honduras thinking we would pick up something there. We knew it wasn't going to be a people group, but it's a country, and had a horrible trip in Honduras. And I was just like, God, I'm done with, not done with missions, but I'm done with looking for this people group. And I remember, I told God, I said, I'm not looking anymore because this is just not going to work. Literally, that was a Sunday night I came home from Honduras when I said that. And on Tuesday, David Johnson, who some of y'all might know, is Cheryl Davis, Donnie Davis's wife's brother, with the International Mission Board, comes to my office and comes to the front desk. And I used to be in Marty's office, if y'all remember that. And I hear him say, hey, I'm here to talk to your missions pastor. And I was like, yeah, I'll talk. So I talked to him. He goes, you ever thought about adopting a people group in Senegal? And I'm like, nope, never have. And so he comes in, he sits down, and I kind of threw out a fleece because that's what we do. And I said, well, if you can find me a people group that fishes, I'll be okay with that. He goes, here's 10. And so everybody fishes in Senegal. So I didn't know, but so God did. But and so he tells us within 3 months, he had set up a couple meetings for us with people groups. When we went over there, we found this people group, the Corone people that we talk about here all the time. And God has, just to see God at work in that, and the fact that we've seen lives changed and transformed, and we've seen churches start. We've seen people from our church leave this church to go and do missions because of that, and they're doing that in Senegal. And really, we have 3 full mission units in Senegal because of all that are, and I have friends that are eternal friends that live in Senegal that I would have never met, that I'm going to spend all the time in heaven with, and Roger's going to be telling me to preach the word, even though I don't have to because I'm right there in front of God anyhow. But we're going to have those kind of relations. And I just think about that fact that for me, it wasn't a bad thing, but I had lost hope that would ever happen. And God just gives me, somebody walks in our door and says, can I speak to the missions pastor? So that kind of stuff happens. It was the barley harvest when he walked in. So so verse 1 of chapter 2. It says, now Naomi and here we get introduced to Boaz. Naomi had a relative of her husband, a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. Okay, it starts off telling us that Boaz is worthy right from the beginning, because Boaz is maybe one of the most redeemable, lovable, best people that you can possibly meet in the Bible, maybe ever. So anyhow, and we were talking, I don't know when it was, about 8-9 months ago, we were doing a Bible study in here, and somebody said, why does nobody ever name their children Boaz? That's a good name. I mean, like, you're naming him after a really quality person. So if I ever have a boy, I'll name him Boaz. That's probably not going to happen, but yeah. So, but anyhow, Boaz is a good guy. I mean, Boaz is, I think, I look at Boaz and I say, I hope I can live up to the standard that Boaz does. And so it talks about when they're announcing who he is, they say a worthy man. I just think that's incredible. And it says, and Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, let me go into the field and glean among the ears of grain after him, in whose sight I shall find favor. So Ruth, with Naomi is hopeless. Naomi is crushed. She's bitter. What does Ruth do?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Oh.
When I look at you, it typically means
okay.
I have a question for you, John.
She has hope. She goes and says, hey, let me help take care of it.
Yeah, she's like, I'm not going to sit here and wallow in this. I'm going to go do something. I'm going to go work. I'm going to go find something to do. And she said, and she said to her, it's funny because she tells Naomi, I'm going to go find some place to glean. Naomi goes, all right, go, my daughter. So Naomi's like, I'm going to stay here, but you go ahead. And so Naomi is still caught up in her hopelessness and says, so she set out and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers, and she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was the clan of who? Elimelech. And they're going to keep telling us that because that's really important. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem, and he said to the reapers, the Lord be with you. And they answered, the Lord bless you. Even in our day, owners of businesses or owners of farms or owners of whatever don't necessarily walk up to their employees and go, the Lord bless you. And this says something about the quality of Boaz, that he is speaking well to his servants, which in that period of time would never happen. He's telling his servants, I hope the Lord blesses you. And they are like, I hope the Lord blesses you, because they like him. Instead of saying, take this job and shove it, they're like, yeah, the Lord bless you too. Because when he blesses you, you're really good to us, and we appreciate that. And so we see just another glimpse into Boaz as that person that just good guy. I don't know how to say it anyway. Good people. Then Boaz said to his young man who was in charge of the reapers, whose young woman is this? So he sees Ruth. I always have this feeling that Ruth is probably kind of attractive, but I could be wrong. But that just might be me transposing that on. But he sees Ruth and he goes, so you can read this two ways. You can say, hey, who is that woman over there reaping? Or you can say, ooh, who is that woman over there reaping? So you can read it either way you want, however you picture this story. And the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered. Josh, will you read what he answered? Part of 6 and 7.
And the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered, she is the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. She said, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves after the reapers. So she came, and she continued from the early morning until now, except for a short rest.
Okay, so how did he describe Ruth?
That she was a hard worker.
Okay, she was a hard worker?
Yep. That she came representing her mother-in-law.
Yeah. So this is just a woman who's out in a field with a bunch of workers that they have taken enough time during their work to realize she's a hard worker. We know she's related to because Bethlehem's a small town. They were all going, Naomi brought a Moabite back. You know what I mean? So that was kind of going around, I'm sure. But they knew that she was doing this for her mom. They saw quality in her just because she was doing something that they considered was good for Naomi and faithful as a daughter-in-law. And they saw her working hard. So they talked very, very well about her. So you have really highly regarded Boaz, and now you have very highly regarded Ruth working in the same field together. And so in verse 8 it says, then Boaz said to Ruth, now listen, my daughter, do not go to glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young women. Let your eyes be on the field that they are reaping and go after them. Have I not charged the young men not to touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn. Obviously, in this time period, because we're going to see a couple mentions of this, it was probably kind of dangerous work gleaning because you were a woman alone in a field full of men and you had no rights. Just going to leave it at that because they talk about it multiple times. So he sees her and he hears what she's doing for Naomi and he takes her aside and he says, I want you to reap in this field only. And I want you to reap with my girls so you have some security and there's a community there. And he goes, and I have told my men they're not allowed to touch you. And not only that, let me give you a little bit of water and stuff like that. So he basically, because of what she had done for Naomi, Boaz was going to treat her kind of like family, which says a lot about who he is. I'm sorry, I have a question here for Josh, I think, and I can't get it up. So. Never mind. We'll just skip it. All right.
All right.
So then Ruth fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him, why have I found favor in your eyes that you should take notice of me since I am a foreigner? We see great humility in Ruth. Ruth didn't say, well, about time somebody recognized how hard I was working and treat me well. About time somebody saw what I was doing for Naomi and treat me well. Instead, she bowed before him, and she said, why have I found favor in your eyes? And she recognizes who she is to him. She says, because I am a foreigner. He's already treating her like she's family, but she still acknowledges that to him, she is a foreigner and should not be treated that way. And Boaz answered, and he says, all that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me. So somehow, Boaz heard it all, okay? And how you left your father and mother in your native land and came to a people that you did not know before, The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given to you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. So Boaz is saying, because of what you have done, because of who you are blessed by God. And because you're blessed by God, and he is going to protect you, he's going to watch over you, I, Boaz, am going to be an extension of God and watch over you and protect you. So he's saying, I'm going to give you refuge. So Josh, has anybody ever come up to you and said, hey, Josh, and you say, oh, hey, I'm Josh, and they say, oh, I already know everything about you, or I already know who you are.
Steve Vaughn wants to. I don't know. I don't know if I've ever had something quite like that. I remember, I would say, honestly, though, I mean, when I joke and I said you, though, when it came time and God was moving us back from Indiana to here, when you called me about the opportunity here, you obviously knew more about me than I would promise I knew about you.
Okay.
And I don't know how that sounds weird.
I'm secretive. Yeah.
Well, no, but I meant like I never had a chance to work with you, but you had a chance to get to know me and see me working here. And I don't mean that to toot my own horn.
No, there's truth to that. I mean, I didn't, me and Josh, I think people think that we were super close before he left. We weren't that close. Because we worked in two different areas. I mean, we talked, they were in there, and I was around him, and I played basketball with him and made fun of him while we were playing basketball.
That's true.
But other than that, we didn't go to lunches very often. We didn't spend a lot. But I watched Josh at work with other people. I listened to hear Josh talked about by other people. And so when God said, or when we had a position, it was very clear to me. I was like, I want to find Josh Blight and see if he's interested. So there was some of that Josh found favor because of what he had done, not because of what he had done with me. But in this case, Boaz, she's found favor in his eyes before he ever even knew her. So in Boaz's mind, Ruth was a quality person before he banged into her in this field. And so because she was being faithful, and being faithful led to her recognition. And I think that's an important thing for us to remember. When we're faithful to the things of God, when we're faithful to God's commands, when we're faithful to God's words, typically we're not doing things that we shouldn't do. We're not acting in a way we shouldn't act. And people know that, even sometimes before they ever meet you. They'll be like, oh, I know who you are. I've had this from our church before. We're like, oh, you're from Thomas Road? I know all kinds about Thomas. I mean, positive. Most times I saw Ansel go. But no, it's, typically like, oh, we've heard great things about Thomas Road. We were, I was flicking through TV once, and I never, ever do this. And I flicked onto, is it C-SPAN or FSU's channel, whatever it is. And it was a city council meeting. And there was a black pastor that I'd never met in my life, said the only church on the north side that does anything for our communities is Thomas Road Baptist Church. And, we worked in Oak Ridge. We were at Pineview. We had done some stuff with the, what's that community? Providence community. Yeah. We had done a little bit of stuff with them, but I never met this man. And that, so because we had been faithful in those areas, we had been recognized by somebody we didn't know. And so that's an important thing to remember, because you don't want to be recognized by somebody you know for something else. You don't want them to say, oh, yeah, I know about you. Yeah, I mean, that's not good. Yeah. So, and I would say that if this has never happened to you, you might need to be a little concerned about that, because you might not be living a life that transposes, speaks to the quality that God has in your life. Does that make sense? So, all right, so moving on. Where was I?
You were in, verse 13.
Okay, verse 13, thank you. See, I need your all's help more than I think I do. Then she said, I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, though I am not one of your servants. And at mealtime, Boaz said to her, come here and eat some bread and dip your morsel in the wine. So she sat beside the reapers, and he passed to her roasted grain, and she ate until she was satisfied, and she had some left over. When she rose to glean, Boaz instructed his young men, saying, let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not reproach her. And also pull out some of the bundles for her, and leave it for her to glean, and do not rebuke her. So he is now going from, I'm going to help this young lady out because she's what she's done for Naomi, and because she's a relative through Naomi, to he is going well beyond what he should have to do. And so what we're seeing is out of the goodness of his heart, he is doing this because he's a good man, but he's also doing this because of Naomi and what she has done for Naomi. And so he is treating her with an extra measure of goodwill and of hospitality and all that. So in verse 17, it says, so she gleaned in the field, and I love, this is one of my favorite parts. So she gleaned in the field until evening, and then she beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley, which is about 3/5 of a bushel, but I don't even know what a bushel is like total. So I also read that it's 22 liters, which would mean that it is 11 2-liter bottles. How about that? So if you want to know what an ephah is. And she took it up and went into the city. Her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned. She also brought out and gave her the food that had been left over after satisfying. And her mother-in-law said to her, where did you glean today, and where have you worked? Blessed be the man who took notice of you. She doesn't know that it's Boaz. She just knows that whoever treated Ruth the way he did, treated her much more graciously than she deserved, and has provided for them in a way that she never expected Ruth. I mean, Ruth went out, she was probably thinking, might get a couple handfuls of barley or whatever, and she comes back with 11 2-liters. Okay, so think about it that way. So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked, and said, the man's name with whom I work today is Boaz. And Naomi said to her, and you can see this kindling, this like rekindling of hope here. And the woman said to her, where am I? And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, may he be blessed by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead. So she's already alluding to the fact that he's blessed because of his kindness, but he's also blessed because of his kindness because he is doing what he, as a family member, as a member of the clan of Elimelech, is supposed to do. He is being faithful just like Ruth was being faithful. And Naomi said to her, this man is a close relative of ours. He is one of our redeemers. So God is providing for Ruth and Naomi through Boaz because he is doing what he is meant to do. He's being faithful. So I want to talk about, a lot of times we talk about chance and versus God's sovereignty. Okay, so we look at this and we say, was it chance that Ruth just accidentally bumped onto the right field, and Boaz happened to be coming back from wherever he was? Because it talks about him entering into Bethlehem, he meets her. All this was done by chance. Okay, we can say that, or we can say, did God have a plan? Was God orchestrating all this? So when you look at this story, Josh, was it chance or was it sovereignty?
We should always defer to God's sovereignty.
Okay. Why should we always I like the way you answered that. Why should we always defer to God's sovereignty?
Because I think that, this jumped to a statement from New Testament with Jesus, that every good and perfect gift comes from above. And so that was something that God has used in my life to help give me discernment about when is something, a door that God is opening versus is it a good opportunity? And when you sit something and you go and you look at the story and you say, could there have been a better place? Could it have gone any better? Is there a more perfect person for her to feel that she had found? Because they're more perfect. One of the redeemers, it says one of our redeemers. So it kind of implies there was multiple redeemers. Mm-hmm. Maybe there would have been redeemers in the family that wouldn't have been so kind. And so I feel like when you sit there and you read this and you just say, there's too many, I'll say, coincidences before you just start go, oh no, this can't be coincidence anymore. This has to be, the leading of God and how He's just amazing at weaving things together.
Yeah, I think sometimes in the moment we kind of lean towards chance. I think more often in hindsight we lean towards God is at work because we see all those pieces put together. But when you think about believing in chance over God's sovereignty, it's kind of like playing the lottery. You feel like if I play it enough times, I should win. Well, I don't want to live a life where I should win. Okay, I don't know about you, but I want to live a life where I know that somebody is rooting for me, guiding me, directing me, empowering me to be the best that I can be. That is the difference between living a life by believing in chance and living a life and believing in God's sovereignty, control, authority, orchestration, however you want to call that. So in this case, I'm positive because we have the hindsight and we're in the middle of the moment. This was through God's sovereignty. So then he says, and Ruth the Moabite said, besides, he said to me, you shall keep close by my young men until I have finished all my harvest. And Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, it is good, my daughter, that you go out with the young women, lest in another field you be assaulted. See, it's a problem. So she kept close to the young women of Boaz, gleaning until the end of the barley and wheat harvest. And she lived with her mother-in-law. This little verse at the very end says that she continue to glean the barley to the end of the barley and the wheat harvest. Ruth had a lot. Boaz gave her a bunch on that first day. Ruth could have just sat back with Naomi, propped her feet up and said, hey, God's blessed us. I've done what you asked me to do. But no, she went back day after day after day, and you continue to see that faithfulness that she has. So in chapter 3, verse 1, and this is when the story starts to really kind of move and get interesting and kind of like a movie. So it says, then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, my daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? Is not Boaz our relative? With those women you were. See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Wash therefore and anoint yourself and put on your cloak and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies, then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do. So this sounds like the same manipulation we see with some of the other Old Testament people. It isn't as much as we might think. It is really basically Naomi is seeing God at work. She's putting the pieces together. Isn't it odd that you were on that field and it's Boaz's? Isn't it odd that he's shown favor to you? Isn't it odd that you need a husband and that we need an inheritance? If we put all that together, maybe God is working in all this and he wants us to do what is right and to go through the proper steps. So she tells her how to do this. And she tells her to go and to put yourself under his blanket, which is under his protection, which the same thing he said to her earlier was like, put yourself under my wings of refuge. And so what she's really doing is she's putting the pieces in place to see and to allow God work, okay? And she's banking on the fact that Boaz is the man she thinks he is because she says, he will tell you what to do. So if Boaz was not going to be their redeemer, he'd probably be like, what are you doing here and why you got this blanket on top of you? But she's saying she believes enough in Boaz's character and who he is that he is going to do the right thing. Okay, so this is not as manipulative as it might sound. This really is just kind of a, hey, God's at work, let's work alongside of him. Very Henry Blackaby. Find God at work and go along. And after she replied, Ruth says, all that you have said, I will do. That is Ruth's mantra. Whatever you say, I'll do. Whatever you need, I'll do it. Whatever, she does what she's supposed to do. And then it says, so she went. So she's doing what she's supposed to do. She went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had commanded her. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. Then she came softly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. At midnight, the man was startled and turned over, and behold, a woman was laying at his feet. And he says, who are you? Okay, this is an important part because Boaz was surprised that there was a woman laying at his feet. This speaks to his character as well. We just talked about Samson, okay, 2 weeks ago. Samson wouldn't have been, who are you? He would have just been, hey, there you are. And then Judah, when you look at Judah and Tamar, the story of Judah and Tamar, which we have not taught, but Tamar knew that her father-in-law went and visited prostitutes all the time, so she disguised herself as a prostitute. So, this is not like Boaz was a person that was used to having a woman slide underneath to his feet. And this was not a sexual thing at all anyhow. But he's startled by this because of the quality of the person that he is. And she answered, I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings. Remember, he talked about wings of protection, and she's actually put the blanket over herself to be an illustration of that. Over your servant, for you are a redeemer. And he said, may you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have not made this last kindness greater than the first, in that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. And he is thanking her and honoring her because she is giving him the chance to be the redeemer instead of just trying to find an easy fix by going out and finding a man her own age. We kind of assume Boaz is a little bit older, but he is blessing her for doing the right thing, for being faithful, going about this the right way. And so it says, and now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask, for all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. Not just Boaz knew about her, not just the guys in the field knew about her. Everybody in town was talking about Ruth. What did they say about Boaz when he was first introduced?
Worthy man.
He was a worthy man. Now they're all talking about Ruth, that she was a worthy woman. So we see this juxtaposition of two people that were constantly doing what they were called to do and faithful to do what they were purposed to do. And so it says, and now, my daughter, or worthy woman, in verse 12, he says, and now it is true that I am a redeemer, yet there is a redeemer nearer than I. Remain tonight, and in the morning, if he will redeem you, good, let him do it. I don't think Boaz actually felt that way. I think Boaz is hoping that the guy won't redeem her. Okay, he's not saying he'll do it, I'll be fine. He just wasn't trying to put any more drama into it than it needed. So he says, if he will do it, then let him do it. But if he is not willing to redeem you, then as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down here until the morning. More than likely, he asked her to stay with him because he didn't want anybody to see her leaving or anything like that. He is trying to look after her. We get that also from the next passage where it says, so she laid at his feet until morning, but arose before one could recognize another. And he said to her, let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. And he said, bring the garment you are wearing and hold it out. So she held it, and he measured out 6 measures of barley and put it on her. He did not want her reputation stained. He didn't want his reputation stained, and he didn't want God's reputation stained. So he's trying to do this in the right way. And then again, he blesses her with the 6 measures of barley. So she goes into the city, and one of my favorite lines in the whole Bible is here. It says, so they went into the city, and when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, how did you fare, my daughter? And then she told her all that the man had done for her, and saying, these 6 measures of barley he gave to me, for he said to me, you must not go back empty-handed to your mother-in-law. He's providing for Naomi as much as he is Ruth, which we see constantly. And here's the line. She replied, wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest, but will settle this matter today. Naomi knew that God was at work, but she also knew that Boaz was serious about this. She also knew that Boaz was he liked her daughter-in-law. So she kind of understood what this was. And so this was a move from, she had put her hope in man up to this point. Okay, Naomi put her hope in Elimelech, and Elimelech took her to Moab, and she put her hope in the fact that she was going to be protected from the famine there. Didn't happen. Then she puts her hope in the fact that her sons died. Didn't happen. Then she puts her hope in the fact that I can't do anything, so she lost hope because there was no man. Now she's seeing God at work, and she's putting her hope in God. And God's at work through the person of Boaz. So, chapter 4. Josh, you want to say anything? I'm tired.
No.
Okay.
I could read for you.
No. Yeah, why don't you read for me? Read 1 through 4.
Now Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down there, and behold, the Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, turn aside, friend, sit down here. And he turned aside and sat down. He took the 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit down here. So they sat down. Then he said to the Redeemer, Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here, in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me, that I may know, for there is no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you. And he said to him,
Wait. And he said to him, go ahead.
And he said to him, I will redeem it.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. I was just testing Josh to see how good he was. So in this passage, again, we see Boaz doing things the right way. He's being faithful to the way they were supposed to do it. He goes to the gate. I've been talking about the gate in church, talking about that's where you do business, and in Deuteronomy when it talks about taking your faith with you everywhere you go and put it on your gate posts. And it was the idea of this is the place where business, politics, decisions, settlements were done. And so he goes and the man walks by and he goes, come here. And I've actually seen this done in villages in other countries. I've never seen it done in America. But where they'll say, hey, I've been waiting for you. Come here, sit down. And then they sit down, and the next thing you know, there's like 12 guys sitting down around him. And it was all kind of, so they have witnesses there, and they're doing it. And Boaz starts off softly. He's like, hey, you know Naomi's back. And because she's back, Elimelech has that field that we need to purchase to redeem her and all that kind of stuff. And you're the closest redeemer. So if you'll do it, but if you won't, I'll do it. And so he kind of is not tricking him, but he's luring him in with the soft sell. And then he comes right back after that and he says, then Boaz says, the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. The man probably was like, oh yeah, I could use that field. I mean, that'd be great. I'll take the field. And then Boaz goes, oh, but it's not just a field. You have to redeem all of their inheritance by continuing the line of Elimelech through Ruth, the Moabite's, his daughter-in-law. And so then the Redeemer says, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption for yourself, for I cannot redeem it. Okay, I don't know how much, I did my master's thesis on the word kinsman redeemer, which I would tell you all don't. But and so the idea of a redeemer was something that God put in place. The idea was that a redeemer was part of God's law to protect the poor, the orphan, the widow, and to provide something for them because they had no rights in society. And so when he asked, when you are established as the redeemer, not one of the redeemers like they say here, but the redeemer, you didn't have a yes or no answer to this. You were to redeem the person that you were the redeemer for. We see that go back to Judah and Tamar, and who actually even mentioned in the story. Judah married Tamar off to his son. His son died. He was supposed to arrange for his other sons to redeem her and to marry her, and they kept putting it off and doing all kinds of other things, and she never was remarried, and so she had to masquerade herself as a prostitute and do all this kind of stuff to have Judah actually fulfill the requirement of a kinsman redeemer, even though he did it unwillingly, but God did it purposely and had a purpose for it. And so we know that this man actually is shirking, in some ways, his responsibility. He's supposed to be the redeemer. And he says, no. Okay? Showing his unfaithfulness to God's law, but it's going to show Boaz's faithfulness to it. And it's just a way of contrasting the two. And so the man neglecting his duties due to the circumstances, Boaz would not. So now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging to confirm a transaction. The one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other. I'm really glad we don't do transactions this way anymore. I don't want your shoe. I don't want to give you my shoe. But anyhow, they would take off their sandals and give it to each other. And this is a manner of attesting in Israel. So when the Redeemer said to Boaz, buy it for yourself, he drew off his sandal. Real quick note aside here. Notice that the Redeemer doesn't have a name. We don't know who the Redeemer was. It doesn't matter who the Redeemer was. He didn't do what he was supposed to do. He doesn't get a place in history. He doesn't get a place in God's word. Boaz does, because he didn't do the redemption. But anyhow, so the Redeemer says, buy it yourself. He drew off his sandal. Then Boaz said to the elders of all the people, you are witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon. He's not just redeeming Elimelech, or actually, he's not just redeeming Naomi. He's redeeming Elimelech, Mahlon, and Chilion. And he says, also Ruth the Moabitess, the widow of Mahlon, I have bought to be my wife. He is not saying he's buying her as property. What he's saying is, I have redeemed her. I have paid the price for her inheritance and for her well-being. To perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brothers and from the gate of his native place. You are my witnesses this day. He did what was right. He redeemed them. He brought them back into a right standard, a right position in the people of Israel and in their clan. And so basically all that had come back. So, Josh, how can the actions of one person bring hope to others?
So I think, when I think about this, the actions of one can bring hope to others is just, I think when we see God working, or we see someone working in such a way that they're pointing people towards God, it's like that idea that we see that, any amount of light shines brightly into the darkness. And so I think that when people can see hope in us, it gives them the ability to say, I can have that hope because I see them have that hope. And so I think that's why, it's key for us to be living that out there, to be in that standing in community where we are actually have an opportunity to speak out, to be able to speak to others. And, as I was actually had a chance to encourage someone this day, is that God doesn't work in your lives for you to hide it. He works in your lives so that others can see him working and he can be glorified, and so.
Well, the gospel brings hope. I mean,
right.
Let's be honest. And so, and we think about our responsibilities. We've been talking a lot about this on Sunday mornings, like what God has called us to do. And when we do those things, we are bringing hope to other people. When we taught this, October maybe? I don't know when we taught this. Shannon had told me a story the day before, and I had written it in my notes, and I had to think really hard about what I would actually wrote in my notes, because I don't know what story I'm talking about. And then it came to me, but Shannon had been at an intersection, and there was a homeless woman, and a lot of times we drive by homeless people like, I'm just going to end up feeding their addiction or whatever, and we don't do anything. The person in front of Shannon gave him a fruit cup. And Shannon told me, she said, Steve, you would have thought that guy had given her $100. She was so excited to have that fruit cup. And so sometimes it's the little things we do can bring hope to another. And so when we're doing what we're called to do, when we're doing what we're responsible to do, as Boaz did here. It says, so I'm going to get you out, I think, maybe, possibly not. Verse 11, it says, then all the people who are at the gates and the elders said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who put together built up the house of Israel. May you act worthily in Ephrathah and renowned in Bethlehem. And may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar, there she is, bore to Judah because of the offspring that the Lord will give you by this young woman. So Rachel and Leah were known. They were famous people to the Israelites. For what reason? They were the mothers, or at least out of their line through their handmaidens, the 12 tribes of Israel, okay? So they're saying, may Ruth have the same renown as Rachel and Leah and have the same renown as Tamar. Now, Tamar was the mother of Sarah and Perez, okay? And Perez was the youngest. He was the twins coming out. And if you remember, they put the thing on the wrong hand. And so because of that, he became got the inheritance to be the tribe of Judah. And so what they're saying is that in our tribe, in Judah, in Israel, may you have the same acclaim as these founding mothers of those tribes. And so they are talking about how much they want success for Ruth because of what she has done, her worthiness. Probably a little bit also because they love Boaz. Boaz seems beloved all the time. And so we get the Ruth marries Boaz. So Boaz took Ruth and became his wife, and he went into her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. So the redeemer was Boaz, but also the redeemer now is going to be the son, Obed, because now he takes on that responsibility of the inheritance of Naomi and Ruth. Does that make sense? And so they said, he shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age, for your daughter-in-law who loves you. Okay? How many of us get that very often? You know what I mean? So, but that's how they saw Ruth, was she loved you enough that she worked all this out for your redemption. Who is more to you than 7 sons who gave you birth. So Ruth is equal to the fact that if Naomi had 7 sons, because she has secured her future for Naomi. It says that then Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. And the woman of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, a son has been born to Naomi. They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, who was the father of David. Now these are the generations of Perez, okay, father of the Judites. Perez fathered Hezron. Hezron fathered Ram. Ram fathered Amminadab. Amminadab fathered Nashon. Nashon fathered Salmon. Salmon fathered Boaz. Boaz fathered Obed. Obed fathered Jesse. And Jesse fathered David. So those are the important people. That's not everybody in the line. That's not how they do it typically. But amazing that in this story, Naomi starts out hopeless. The only person that's standing next to her is a foreigner, her daughter-in-law, Ruth the Moabitess. And in the end, God works it out that she meets Boaz. Her and Boaz become the grandparents of Jesse, who are the great-grandparents of David. So, who is the king after God's own heart, who would then have the covenant with God, the Davidic covenant that the line of Jesus is going to come from. And so you look at this and you say, how could God not have been a part of this? But you also say, you look at this story and you say, how can the Redeemer aspect of this not apply to the Redeemer that would be the person of Jesus Christ who comes out of the line of David? So real quick application. One is remember that our faithfulness and us doing what we're called to do reflects on other people and brings worthiness to us, but it also brings glory to God when we're doing that. And God uses us when we're faithful. Can't use us when we're not. That's just the truth. And in this case, we see where God couldn't use a redeemer, so he found another redeemer. And so if we're not faithful, not willing to be used, God will go find somebody who is.